his way into the
Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 5 of of 49ers University, presented by Shanalytics. Need to make sure I got that one right. I'm joined by my guy, Vinny Saglimbeni, today. If you guys haven't already, go follow him on Twitter. I don't know what you're doing. If you aren't following Vinny, make sure you look out for all the content he's going to be putting out. I'm sure you got a lot of stuff coming up for this offseason, Vinny. And it's been an interesting week for 49ers fans. First off, though, we got to go to the comments to E. Kim, my guy. He's always here every single stream. What's up? I hope you're doing great. And you know what? We're going to have a call-in show sometime soon, because I know we certainly talked about it during the season, but now we're in the off season. Vinny and I, we're going to have to figure out a time maybe next week, and we'll try and put something together for sure so we can get to talk to the people more. I know we got to do it on Twitter Spaces, but you know, this fun live interaction that we get to do is a lot better. So, Vinny, first of all, though, we're going to be talking a lot about the quarterbacks today. A quarterback-heavy show. Jimmy Garoppolo, some Trey Lance. How are you doing, man? How's everything going? Obviously, I don't think we've talked since the Super Bowl has ended.
Yeah.
The NFL season's over. We have a champion. First of all, I do want to say, though, and I haven't had to reflect on this myself, Vinny, but what an NFL season it's been, you know?
Yeah.
I know this is a 49ers-focused show, podcast, but really, I think everyone can say just this NFL season in general is one of the most memorable and one of the better, more entertaining seasons in recent history.
Yeah, no, I would have to agree. And I think, because we've been probably so focused on everything 49ers related stuff that we've forgotten about the other bigger storylines that were happening throughout the year. And I think we kind of saw the culmination of that in the Super Bowl. And I think, you know, in the beginning, and it kind of was like something like you saw most of the storylines in the beginning of the season with the Rams making these big trades for these guys. And then towards the end, you saw Joe Burrow turn into the player that he became this year. And then I think it just ended all perfectly in that Super Bowl. And, you know, the Rams are deserving champions. I know there are some like 49er fans that are, you know, upset that the Rams won. And I think it's either team was deserving of winning, but I think the Rams really kind of deserved it a little bit more than I think the Bengals did. And I think they showed that on that final drive and just in that game in general. The moves that they made were worth it, and I think the Rams now are definitely going to be in a position where they might change the way how teams view team building.
Absolutely.
I think so. It was just a great year, and just a good Super Bowl, good halftime show as well. Obviously,
Oh, yeah.
So
well, and it's funny to look at those two teams, right? They kind of both go counter to what we think about the NFL. Joe Burrow takes this 2-14 team all the ways to the Super Bowl the season after. And the Rams, on the other hand, like you mentioned, like you pointed out, they completely disrupted the way people are going to think in the NFL. So, yeah, and I'm there with Ekim, right? This is a very good team that the Rams had. They had a good to elite quarterback, and they deserve this. They went all in. I think they truly have one of the best rosters in the NFL. So let's waste no more time, though, Vinny. Let's talk about the man that 49ers fans, media, content creators are going to be talking about, and so like really for the rest of time. That's Jimmy Garoppolo, one of the most polarizing figures ever, I think, in sports. No,
for 49ers fans, because everybody else doesn't know what like people just look at it, and I think it's just more black and white. But I think for 49ers fans, one of the more polarizing players in franchise history.
Oh, no question about that. And let me ask you this, right? I think it was reported by our friend Grant Cohn that last offseason, the 49ers had a second-round offer for Jimmy Garoppolo, a second-round pick. I think even from the Patriots was specific team. So since last offseason, let's say Jimmy Garoppolo was worth that second round pick, which I believe would have been around 50th overall. Has Jimmy Garoppolo's value increased from there to this point?
No, but I don't think it's gone down. I think it's just classic Jimmy Garoppolo, right? He hasn't gotten better, but it's just stayed the same. And I think you can say the same with his trade value. I think
the perfect plateau, right? I mean,
right,
you want to talk about the definition of plateauing? Jimmy Garoppolo,
if anything, because heading into last offseason, he was coming off. So like the offseason before this season, he was 6-10. It was like he had missed 10 games, right? And just a year removed from the Super Bowl. And I think that's where teams had a little bit more caution. But I think heading into this offseason now, just the optics of seeing a quarterback that played in the NFC Championship game in a market where teams are going to need quarterbacks, I think that's where that second, third round value is still present there. And I think his highest value at any point was after the Super Bowl appearance.
I agree.
But I think that's just 2 years removed now, and that's just like nonsense at this point. Just because,
if you want to go back to then, a smart move might have been, to maybe go after the biggest free agent in NFL history, Tom Brady, and maybe try and sign him and replace him for Jimmy Garoppolo. But of course, the 49ers only thought Tom Brady was marginally better than Jimmy. But with Jimmy now, like you said, that was probably his peak value. I don't know if his value has decreased or regressed since that point last offseason when there were those talks of him getting traded. I think, some people might say, well, hey, if anything, he's increased his value because, hey, look, he stayed healthy for an entire year. He missed a game here and there, but Jimmy played through it. Well, I would argue that Jimmy actually proved that he is that injury-prone guy that we always thought he was, right? He's constantly getting these injuries that if you look in his last 5 games from that Titans game on, Vinny, 4 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. There was a clear change and drop-off of Jimmy Garoppolo once the injury to his thumb occurred. So I don't really know if I buy the idea that somehow by him playing through all these injuries, he's increased his trade value. But in the same sense, it's not like we've learned anything different that would diminish his value. Jimmy Garoppolo has been the same guy we always thought he was, right? So I think if he was worth a second-round pick, the 50th overall pick, let's just say last offseason, to me, there's no question that he's going to be worth that or around there relative to it. If anything, I could understand him maybe getting a third-round pick this offseason instead of a second. Especially considering his contract situation. But I think the point being, Vinny, is that Jimmy Garoppolo has not raised himself from a second-round pick to a first-round pick value. If anything, that price has stayed stagnant or it's gone down. So I think for any team acquiring Jimmy Garoppolo, if you call the 49ers and offered a second-round pick right now and you really wanted Jimmy and, he was your guy this offseason, you could make that happen today. You really could. In fact, look at the way it happened with Alex Smith when he got traded, Vinny, from Kansas City to Washington. It happened the week of the Super Bowl. And I mean, obviously there's a different compensation, but the point being is that the 49ers have a certain deadline, artificial deadline with Jimmy Garoppolo, the start of free agency, because they are cap strapped as they currently sit right now. And they have more free agents than almost any other team in the NFL. So, people bring up DJ Jones, Laken Tomlinson, those sort of guys, and we'll probably take a wing to discuss them. But in the same sense, how do you bring back your Jordan Willises, your Juwan Jennings, these players that are restricted free agents, exclusive rights free agents? Right now, they just currently don't have the salary cap to be able to do so. So, look, has his trade value increased since last offseason? I don't think so, Vinny. But in the same sense, it's not like it's greatly decreased. It's not like, last offseason Jimmy was worth a second-round pick. Now he's worth a 5th or 6th. I just don't buy that. I think if Jimmy was worth a 2, he has to be at least in that same ballpark this offseason. I think there will be a team that pays a second or a third round pick for him.
Yeah, and I think, and the conversation now isn't whether he's going to be in San Francisco or not. And I think it's going to be conversation of what they can get out of him at this point, because like you mentioned, they have to get some extra money so that they can sign some of these other guys. And I think teams are going to want Jimmy Garoppolo on their team. And I think if the financial, like, given the circumstances of the 49ers, I don't think they necessarily don't want him. It's just, this is a move that they have to make in order to free up some of that cap space to kind of maximize that window that we've always been talking about. So I think there's going to be plenty of teams that are going to want to, hear about the Jimmy Garoppolo mix, because not every team is going to land their Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson or maybe even Aaron Rodgers on their team next year.
Well, and realistically, how many of those guys will be available? I think it's pretty clear that Deshaun Watson is the one player that is pretty much going to get traded no matter what, as long as his legal situation is cleared up. He certainly doesn't seem like he wants a future with the Texans, but you look at Aaron Rodgers, you look at Russell Wilson, all these quote Derek Carr, all these names who could become available. The closer we get to the start of free agency, the less and less likely it seems that those players will be traded from their current teams. So I think for the 49ers, that only raises the value of Jimmy Garoppolo, right? And I think, Vinny, that kind of leads us into our next topic about Jimmy Garoppolo, which is, which team will be most interested in Jimmy? Just looking through the comments real quick, I wanted to bring up this point that Ekim was talking about earlier. I may have lost the comment, but okay, now here it is. So I think, what Ekim's talking about here is Jimmy he has inherent value especially when you consider the fact that Jimmy is a capable starting level quarterback, but there is that sense, Vinny, of if other teams could go after better players, they obviously would, right? Aaron Rodgers, Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson, Derek Carr, even. These are names people bring up all the time. But at the same time, we got to look at what type of team will be interested in Jimmy Garoppolo, right? I want to talk about something we were discussing right before we got on, Vinny. We talked about, Steelers being one of those teams that's potentially interested in Jimmy Garoppolo, even the Saints, Tampa Bay. But to me, Vinny, I don't see a team like that being interested in him. And I'll tell you why. I think it's because when you look at a team's situation, if you're trading for Jimmy Garoppolo, there's just a certain level of desperation you have to have. I think no team who has long-term plans is really thinking about making Jimmy Garoppolo their guy. I think there will be a lot of teams interested in Jimmy Garoppolo as their bridge guy. And the key there is that when you look at teams like the Steelers, who have a coach in place like Mike Tomlin already, who does have a long leash with the franchise, who is the face of the franchise, someone who will get beyond just this year to prove that he needs to stay where he is. Why wouldn't those teams be more interested in going the younger route, Vinny? Malik Willis, that's a prime example of a guy you can bring in. And you know what? It doesn't have to be perfect with him right away, but get him that playing experience. Get him playing now so that further down the road, 2-3 years from now, your team can be even more successful. I think there's a lot of teams who are shopping for quarterbacks who are in that situation, right? I think the situations people need to focus in on and really pay attention to are the quarterback desperate teams, the teams that need to prove themselves one way or the other this season, whatever that means for them. So first off, I think the number one team for when you think about that, Washington, the Commanders. Still funny to say. But with them, Ron Rivera, they obviously made it to the playoffs, but really back-to-back losing 500 seasons. He's not an offensive coach. It's not exactly like they've proven that they can do a lot with this roster. I think while conventionally some people might look at a situation like that and say, hey, just draft a guy And if you don't go sign like a Teddy Bridgewater in free agency, that might not be good enough for what they're trying to accomplish this season, which is they need to prove they can make the playoffs and compete in their division. So I think when you go down the list of teams that we're going to be talking about a lot up until Jimmy Garoppolo gets traded, to me, this is the biggest factor you have to think about is how desperate are these teams to prove that they need to win this season, especially when you consider the fact is this team is likely trading to rent Jimmy Garoppolo for a year. So it's not like you already have a guy in place for the next 3 seasons and you're guaranteed that he's going to be your future. And even then, as a bridge quarterback, I'm sure there will be people who bring up the idea, oh, no, with the Steelers, hey, they should take Malik Willis and trade for Jimmy Garoppolo. I just don't think if a team is doing that, I don't know why they would want to then go trade for a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo, who's so injury prone, who you just can't depend on to be there every single game when you really need it. So if there's a team that's looking at this situation like, hey, I'm going to take a rookie, develop him, and let Jimmy start in front of him until he's ready, I don't know if you can afford, that sort of mindset. I think with Jimmy Garoppolo, you have to be a really desperate team. And I think you can't, look at people brought up teams like Miami or the Saints. I don't know why a brand new head coach would want to bring in Jimmy Garoppolo right away. That just doesn't make sense. In fact, if you really love Jimmy Garoppolo that much, you can probably go and snag him next offseason for half the price and no draft picks. So I just think when we're looking at this, Vinny, people are so focused on teams like the Steelers, the Saints, situations like that. I just don't buy it. I think you need to look at the quarterback desperate teams, the teams that either their head coach or their GM is desperate to prove that they are winners, that they can win with their team is currently constructed. So when I think about it that way, Vinny, 2 teams. Washington I talked about first, but Carolina, where that might not be a conventional location that people would think about as a trade destination for Jimmy, because they have Sam Darnold in place and they're paying him a lot of money this upcoming year. And look, Sam Darnold isn't better than Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't think anyone's arguing that, but I think conventionally you look at that situation and say to yourselves, oh, hey, they already went all in for this guy. They already gave up draft picks for this guy. Why would they go and do that again this next offseason? I would tell you Matt Rule is probably thinking a lot about his job right now and whether or not he's going to be back with the Panthers next season. So you got to look at a lot of situations where the head coach or the GM is in desperate need of that winning season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, I think the one thing that would be intriguing for like newer teams with newer head coaches is just to get that, like you mentioned, that fresh start and to kind of have more of like that solidified guy to be at the head of your realm. I think it's more, and the 49ers are going to send him to a like good location, I think, because they talked and they're going to be working with Jimmy to make sure that he gets in like a good spot. So I think a team that could come up is because I think for Jimmy, at least, it would be more incentivizing, I think, to go to the NFC and stay in the NFC, just in the sense that I think it's a lot more open in the conference as a whole compared to the AFC. Yeah. So I think maybe it seemed like Tampa could be something that could be interesting for him to go to. Obviously, there's weapons there. They have a good team, playoff team still. And I think with Tom Brady being there before, I think it's obvious to make those comparisons between the two, but or in terms of like them being in the same place and maybe having like, not obviously they're not the same player, but like maybe having some similar tendencies and things like that. But I think another team that could be interesting, I know it's an AFC team and it would be trading him to probably the hardest, if not the second hardest division in that conference. But maybe it seemed like Denver looks to go and get Jimmy Garoppolo to kind of fill in those holes. They got a decent receiving core out there. They got a nice running game, I think, and they got some pieces on that defensive side.
But the reason I've pushed back on them, and I think, a lot of teams, is they just brought in a brand new head coach. And with Teddy Bridgewater, quite frankly, they already have the next best Jimmy Garoppolo, right? And they have him at a much, much cheaper option. So, I think there are certain teams you could point to and say, yeah, they need a quarterback. But even if that's the case, when you really go and think beyond it, Nathaniel Hackett, right? The GM who just got hired last year is the Broncos guy. I think they're more in it for the long haul than people realize. So I think when you're looking at destinations, right, one that I was actually starting to think about, Vinny, we saw, Carson Wentz is likely going to get cut by the Colts at some point. That could certainly be a destination. I think, while I don't think Frank Reich is as desperate as a Ron Rivera or a Matt Rule might be, I think what they were looking for with Carson Wentz, he's not a great quarterback, but he has these highs and these lows where he's probably one of the more volatile guys in the league, right? It's so much up and down with Carson Wentz. One game, he looks like Aaron Rodgers. The next game, he looks like not Aaron Rodgers, right? So compared to Jimmy, though, Jimmy, to me, if you're looking from Indianapolis's perspective, he's consistent. You know what you're getting out of Jimmy. And yeah, I don't think Jimmy is necessarily better, or the high-end version of him is better than Carson Wentz. But at the same time, from Indianapolis's perspective, they think their team is so elite around what they have at the quarterback position. And quite frankly, they can set themselves up similar to the way the Niners do, where they work through the run game. They utilize their weapons the best they can, and they lean on their defense. So when you're looking at Jimmy Garoppolo destinations, I feel like Indianapolis is one of those teams that people might not think about just because, hey, they went and traded for Carson Wentz already. They've already done this. Why would they be doing this themselves again? Well, I think what they might see with Jimmy Garoppolo is that he is just that consistent guy year after year, game after game, where you know exactly what you're getting from him if he's healthy, versus Carson Wentz, just so up and down that he wasn't dependable in that same sort of way. And I'll say one thing too. I would have banked on Jimmy Garoppolo beating the Jaguars in that Week 18 game that they desperately needed to get into the playoffs. So I think it's going to be interesting, Vinny. We don't know what teams will trade or are interested in Jimmy Garoppolo. But as the market plays out, it's obviously going to hinge very much on who gets traded in terms of other quarterbacks and who doesn't. But for Jimmy moving forward, I don't know how many options he's going to have, Vinny. I know you mentioned it a second ago. People have talked about it themselves that the 49ers are going to want to send them to a team that wins, right, in a winning situation. I just don't know if they'll be afforded that luxury.
I think they're going to send him more to a team that – I think they're going to work with him to send him to a team that he would want to go to. I don't think it's necessarily going to be a winning team.
Right.
But I think they're just going to work. They're not just going to say, hey, we're going to send you out to Detroit or whatever. Yeah. Right? I think Indy's an interesting choice. If they
play in a dome.
Yeah. And I was thinking too, if Baker Mayfield wasn't on his rookie deal, would Cleveland be interested in Jimmy G?
I still think they might be, honestly.
Because I think that's another interesting spot that they look into. Kevin Stefanski, used to work with Kirk Cousins, and I think Jimmy Garoppolo and Kirk Cousins are close. I think Kirk Cousins is obviously better. Yeah, I think a decent amount better, but I think that you can see some of the comparisons in their play styles and things like that, and I think Kevin Stefanski could get a guy like that to help him out.
Right.
So,
and the Browns tried to trade for Jimmy Garoppolo way back when the 49ers did. So we know that they were certainly interested in him in the first place. It'll be interesting how this thing plays out. But I do feel like, Vinny, the closer and closer we get to Jimmy Garoppolo getting traded, the less and less confident I feel about which team is going to make that move.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of teams.
There's a lot of teams, and you know what? I feel like a team could just come out of nowhere and completely surprise us. Kind of be one of those teams that no one has been expecting or penciling in.
But dude, I was just gonna say, could you imagine if he lands in Seattle next year? Go from Russell Wilson to Jimmy Garoppolo.
I think 49ers, you know what? It'd be really interesting because there's all these 49ers Jimmy Garoppolo defenders. I would love to see them talk about Jimmy Garoppolo on the Seahawks.
Yeah, and I had a and my buddy Jack and I, who's actually a Rams fan, we do another podcast called Go for Two, and I had the craziest. We had our hot takes heading into next year, and my crazy hot take was if the Seahawks trade Russell Wilson, they'll be the worst team in the NFL next year.
Oh,
1 second.
Damn. Well,
because
dude,
and it's easy for me to say being a Niner fan and things like that, but like.
I think you hit it right on the money, man.
Look at that roster and tell me how convincing that is. Is DK going to be the same player without Russell Wilson? No. He may not even. Sorry, I'm eating sunflower seeds. He's not even the like. If you were to rank the best of receivers in the NFC West, each number one receiver, he's probably fourth.
Yeah, he probably
and he may not even be the best receiver on his team compared to Tyler Lockett. They're pretty and who's their backup right now? Geno Smith. They're pretty much the Jets. They have Geno Smith and they have Jamal Adams, and they're the Jets. That team is terrible. Like that is a bad team.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying they're going to be bad in the future or things like that, but I'm saying in terms of next season, they could be in the running for the number one pick the following year.
Hey, well, and if they add Jimmy Garoppolo, I don't think that hurts their chances. Ekim brought this point up that 49ers wouldn't be able to defeat Seattle.
And they'll be 2-15 with the 2 wins being against the Niners.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's just the way it has to happen. Another thing Ekim mentioned, Cleveland, they did decline that 5th-year option for Baker, so. Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, the Browns.
So maybe they'll just let him use that last year, and then they'll just let him go as a free agent. I don't know.
Yeah. Hey, or maybe they decide, you know what? We need a more handsome Baker Mayfield. We need the Levi's Baker Mayfield, so they can go and get that for a 3rd-round pick. It's an easy cost.
No,
I'll help drive him to the airport myself.
Hey, actually, I don't know if Cleveland's an option. That's LeBron's city, and he's a Jordan guy, so. I don't know if we'll want to go.
That's
take over LeBron's city. So
that's true, and we know Jimmy is a Chicago guy. So yeah, certainly something to keep in mind moving forward. But let's talk about the quarterback of the future, Vinny. We've been talking a lot about the guy who isn't going to play for the 49ers anymore. Why don't we talk about the guy who's going to be the starter for the next 15 years? Easy. It got leaked overnight by Javier Vega. I encourage everyone to go on Twitter and go check out his page as soon as possible if you haven't. Some throws of Jimmy Garoppolo of Trey Lance performing in practice with the scout team against the first team defense. Some pretty impressive throws, Vinny. Before we get into the expectations for Trey, what do you make of what you saw on Twitter last night, maybe this morning?
Terrible throws. No, I'm kidding. A little
bad mechanics. Bad mechanics.
A little tad behind, not right on the dot. But I mean, I just think it's just a little glimpse into what we can see from this kid. And I think there's only one other quarterback that I would want heading into next season. And I think it's Aaron Rodgers. If there's a trade for Aaron Rodgers there for whatever reason, I think.
Can I add another name?
Tom? You gonna say Tom?
Yeah, I'm gonna say Tom Brady.
Yeah, and I think if that opportunity,
say no.
you can't, and that sucks for his development and everything like that. But if anything, Grant made a really good point on his one of his shows. Like, there were questions as to what he would learn from Jimmy in terms of like playing. That like you're learning stuff from Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. For whatever it is that you want to learn from them. So I think those are the only 2 guys. Otherwise, you got to write it out with this kid. And I think, we see the athleticism. We see the way he's able to move. And I think it's very promising that we're going to see him and Brandon Ayuk work a lot together in the offseason. And if he can be like what he was kind of like in that 2020 production and that tail end of 2021 with guys like Debo and Kittle already on the team, this could really be the offensive juggernaut that we know Kyle Shanahan can create with this team. Part of with that defense, there's no reason to say that they can't be making another deep playoff run next season.
And I think that's really what gives everyone the most optimism with Trey Lance moving forward, Vinny, is although we don't have a large sample size from him and we just haven't seen a lot, the supporting cast around him is going to be as good as it gets for any first-year starting quarterback. Obviously, Kyle Shanahan, he's a great play caller. He's one of the best offensive minds in the league, but having all the weapons at his disposal, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Elijah Mitchell, Juszczyk, Juwan Jennings even, I think Trey Lance is set up better for success than any first-year starter I can think of in recent memory, besides maybe Patrick Mahomes. So I think in the one sense, people should have high expectations for Trey because 49ers themselves have invested so much in him, right? They invested the picks that they did in him. They selected him third overall with other worthy candidates available at the spot that they took him. I think Trey Lance is Kyle's project, but also the great thing, Vinny, is that because Trey Lance has that support, because he has everything behind him that he does, he doesn't have to do a lot next season. He can really operate within the Jimmy Garoppolo offense in the sense that they're going to be doing a lot of similar stuff. They're not going to be running the ball that much more or less. They'll probably be running and passing at the same rate they did this past season. But if anything, all it does is it helps them extend the play further. Trey Lance will move outside the pocket, and there are more vertical throws that you can add to this offense. And I think the cool thing, Vinny, is they can take what they already had with Jimmy and just build off of it and keep expanding it further and further. The more confident Trey gets in himself, because I think that's the one thing that I heard specifically Grant and other media members talk about is that, he did look very good in training camp. He did impress a lot of people, but in the same sense, I don't know if he was that confident thrower that he needed to be at that point. Having the full off season, getting to operate within the system, he's just going to gain more and more confident. And the more confident he is, the more Kyle can do with him. And it's also going to be a learning process with Kyle too. They got to learn to do this together.
Yeah, it's going to be an up and down thing, and I think we're going to see some of those obstacles in the beginning of the year, and I think that's going to be normal, just like because you could do as well as you want in practice, right? But once you get into that game, week one, that's when it really gets going. So, yeah, it's not going to be too concerning unless there's, an injury, obviously. Then that's obviously something to look out for.
And with Trey, let's try and put a number to it, Vinny. I think in terms of touchdowns to interception, in terms of yards for him, my expectations are pretty high because, like I said, I think he's set up for a certain level of success. I'm going to go with this. I'm going to say 30 to 35 total touchdowns, passing and rushing. And
combined. Okay.
Combined, yes. Yes. About 7 turnovers, and I want to say about 4,000 yards in the air, 400 to 600 in the ground. I think that's a fair expectation for Trey Lance.
For me, it comes down to two things, and Grant wrote an article about this, and I completely agree with him. Every stat has to be better than Jimmy Garoppolo's, and the 49ers have to be better than whatever team Jimmy Garoppolo goes to. This is the expectation when you trade for a guy that is the number 3 overall pick in the draft. As much as you want to say whether they traded up for that, he was the third. There were other quarterbacks that they could have taken, other players that they could have taken, and the 49ers said Trey Lance is the third best player in this year's draft. So with that, and especially with a lot of the 49er fans who have their strong opinions about Jimmy Garoppolo, typically the more negative opinions, this is the expectation for him just to be better than Jimmy Garoppolo in every stat that he can be better than. So he's got to throw for more yards, more touchdowns, less interceptions, less turnovers, more rushing yards, more rushing touchdowns, everything.
Yeah, I know that the rushing ones might be a little easier to overcome than the passing ones.
And people may think that's harsh.
No.
This is the number 3 pick, and as bad and the way some fans talk about Jimmy Garoppolo, this shouldn't be really much of asking a lot for him.
Yeah.
If
Well,
you think
and
about it.
Eric Sully's right in the comments. The 49ers paid
Yes.
for Trey Lance like he was the number 1 pick in the draft. And that's the end of the story is they gave that package that the football team gave up so many years ago for Robert Griffin III that teams have done to move up for a Jared Goff or a player like that. And I'm not comparing those guys to Trey Lance 1-to-1, but the fact of the matter is that those situations, those teams, this is the price you pay. And these are the expectations that are put on this player's shoulder when you do pay that price. So I think while it is, and we talked about this before, Vinny, it is very unfair to Trey Lance, this whole situation. This is just what he has to deal with, given the circumstances. And look, I'm not trying to say, oh, his life is terrible or anything, but really, to put the amount of pressure that's going to be put on him and to have the expectations people do, it's a lot. And the one thing, Vinny, I want to say before we move on from the Trey Lance topic is everyone gave Jimmy Garoppolo all this credit for the way he's handled himself this season. And, how much
give credit to Trey, too.
You got to give credit to Trey, man, because, both of us, right, are – if you guys don't know, this is 49ers University. Vinny and I are both college students at the current time, and we're both seniors in college. Trey Lance is younger than we are. I mean, he really is. This isn't a Colin Kaepernick who got to the league at 25 years old. This is a kid. So I think not enough people have given Trey Lance the credit for the level of maturity he's had throughout this season. Man, I think, just a credit to him for being that patient guy. And it seems like he has those leadership qualities that the 49ers have been talking about, the CEO type of personality that they've been referring to ever since they drafted him. I don't think he's done anything to prove that isn't true. And I want to go over to a comment real quick before we move on. Josh was saying next season, will Lance have a better season than the other quarterbacks drafted in his class? That's an excellent question.
So will he be better than Trevor Lawrence,
Zach Wilson, Mac Jones, and Justin
Fields, Davis Mills?
Davis Mills, totally forgot.
Will he be better than those guys?
I'm gonna venture to say yes, but not because he's necessarily better than those guys.
Not statistically better than all those guys.
I was gonna say, I mean, statistically it might look different, but I think what I'm saying is that Trey Lance is much more set up for success than any of those guys are. I would say, the guy who has the next best situation is probably Mac Jones. But the fact is that Mac Jones just isn't going to put up these gaudy numbers that we think Trey Lance has the potential, at least, for. So I think Trey Lance's season will look better maybe than any other of those starting players, but I don't know if his stats will be better just because 49ers are going to be running the ball so much because they don't want him to pass the ball 40, 50 times a game. That's just not their game plan. They don't need him to play hero ball like the Bears asked Justin Fields to play last season. What they need him to do is to be Jimmy Garoppolo plus, right? Throw 20 to 25 throws and be that weapon that we think he is. So I think, will he have a better season than the other quarterbacks? Yes, but they might finish with better statistics because a guy like Trevor Lawrence or a guy like Zach Wilson, if they start every single game and their teams aren't very good and they have to come from behind every single game, there's a lot of garbage time. I could see situations where they have better statistics than Trey Lance does, but Trey Lance has the better looking season from a film standpoint once you really break it down.
Yeah. Do you think there's a lot of, you talk about like pressure being on Trey. Do you think there's a lot of pressure to be better than Garoppolo for Trey?
I think absolutely, yes. I think there's a lot of pressure to not necessarily, I wouldn't say I think there is pressure to be better than Jimmy Garoppolo, but I think there's more of that pressure to have to make the playoffs, to have a winning season. That's what I look at as the most pressure, because even if Trey Lance plays worse than Jimmy Garoppolo does and they make it to the playoffs, they get a round or two into that postseason, I think people would still look at that as a success. So I think, unfortunately for Trey, much of the way people consider, his season a success or not is going to be based on the team's success, right? Even if the 49ers have terrible injuries, they go 9-8 and Trey Lance looks like the next Justin Herbert, there will still be people saying, well, they got to the playoffs with Jimmy Garoppolo. They were 10-7 with Jimmy Garoppolo, all that kind of crap. So I don't know. Yeah, I think so,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's fair.
And we've been talking a lot about the quarterbacks, but we're gonna do our draft now. What we're gonna do every episode this offseason. We're gonna have a different draft, a snake draft, kind of fantasy football style. We're gonna do 2 rounds with me and Vinny. I'm taking the first overall pick because I'm greedy like that. And then
I don't snake. Right.
No, we are snaking. So you're gonna.
So I get 2 picks. I get to pick 2 people in a row. Okay.
So you're gonna have consecutive picks, and then I'll have the last pick. In the topic we're doing today, and also for everyone watching, if you have any suggestions for drafts in the future, let us know because we want to make this a part of every single show we're doing. Is going to be the most improved player on the 49ers in 2022. Before we get into it, though, Vinny, I want to make one thing clear. For one, no free agents. So we cannot talk about guys like K'Wan Williams, DJ Jones, Jaquiski Tartt.
So guys who are on the roster.
Yes, they are on the roster. Or, you know what? I'll include also exclusive rights and restricted free agents because those players are likely back unless the 49ers just don't want them. So except for unrestricted free agents, we're going to do most improved from here on out. And with the first overall pick, Vinny, I've been thinking about this a little before our show today. I think this is a pretty easy first-round pick. I think it's a pretty easy first overall pick. In fact, I think you're probably going to have trouble with who you select for the next 2 because the guy I'm going with is Brandon Ayuk. Brandon Ayuk, obviously, beginning of the season for the 49ers, he was in Kyle Shanahan's proverbial doghouse. I mean, let's just call it what it is. He wasn't getting the playtime that he should have gotten. He was not getting the targets that he should have had. Beyond that, though, Vinny, I think there's an expectation that once Trey Lance is the quarterback of this team, it's going to suit Brandon Ayuk's skill set so much better than a Jimmy Garoppolo would. And more specifically, that vertical passing game where, Ayuk, he is just such a great, sleek downfield runner who's able to create all kinds of space for himself. And within this Kyle Shanahan offense where he's the 3rd passing option and he's not getting the number one, defender guarding him. And he has more desirable matchups. I see the 49ers using, abusing, and absolutely maximizing Brandon Ayuk's potential this upcoming season, especially now that he's gotten out of whatever funk he was supposedly in earlier in the season. None of this Trent Sherfield, Mohamed Sanu crap. Let's not deal with that anymore. It's the Brandon Ayuk show next year, and Trey Lance is going to be a big part of that.
Great. All right. So looking at the players that are available for me to pick, there's obviously some good ones to choose, right? I mean, you got your Kadar Hallmans of the world, your Tabor Peppers, players like that. I would have picked River Craycraft, but he signed with the Dolphins today.
I know, man.
And I'm one of the people that actually think that River Craycraft isn't terrible, but a lot of people do think that he's terrible. But anyway, my first pick is going to be Diamador Lenore.
Oh, okay.
I think that's going to be a guy that I look at that's going to make a really big jump next year. And I think part of that is going to be similar to how we saw improvement from Ambry Thomas this year. Getting him reps is going to help him a lot. And I think seeing him in that slot position next season, because getting a lot of those reps, I think if they don't sign K'Wan Williams, is only going to help him.
Yeah.
And I think we saw a little bit in the beginning of the season when he did play how, locked down that guy was. So, especially with another year of D'Amico, I think that's only going to help him as well. And so that's going to be my first guy. I'm going to go Diamador Lenore.
That's an excellent pick. And just for Lenore, I wanted to mention real quickly, I hope he gets that opportunity in the slot. And now that he's had a year in the system, that's one thing I talked about. I think with Eric Crocker, I believe it was, or actually, no, sorry, Coach Noah Johnston. We were talking about specifically how I thought they should go after slot in the draft, but he just said, look, you don't want to put that guy in that situation in his first year in his career where he has to worry about run fitting. He has to keep. There's so much to do with that position that you just need some time. Before you really start. So for a guy like Lenore, hey, if they have that confidence in him, they should definitely start him moving forward.
Yeah, and looking at my other guy, I was thinking Aaron Banks, but I can't really gauge how much he's improved because he didn't play. Maybe he's like, standout player of the year potentially. If they'd go with him over, why am I blanking? Daniel Brunskill. God, I could go Robbie Gould.
I was gonna say Mitch Wishnowsky is certainly a name.
You know what? Because I don't know if he'll be on the team. He's on contract with the team right now, but I don't know if he'll be on the team next year or the year following. But will he even? No. I was looking at Mike McGlinchey, but
I actually, real quick, I want to take a wing to talk about this for like 20 seconds. They're not trading Mike McGlinchey. There's just no way.
No, I don't think so.
But
I'll go with. You know what? I'm gonna. Oh my god, most improved player. Like, just improved include Debo because Debo was all pro first. He was first team all pro, right?
It can. It can. I mean, hey, any way you want to take this.
Like, oh my goodness. There's so many good players on this team. I don't know who to. Because they may pay him like they want him to return. For the money that he's getting paid, I'm going to go with Lincoln Tomlinson if they do decide to re-sign him.
Okay.
I think he could be, because he was at the Pro Bowl this year, I think he could be, one of those guys that could really see some improvement. And that's in a good way, meaning that he'll be in like the all-pro conversation next year.
Yeah.
This is a really tough list, though, because I think there's a lot of like Ayuk's obviously the big one. Maybe you look at a guy like Ambry Thomas, too. I don't know. There's another guy of improvement. Trey Lance technically will improve.
I think Juwan Jennings, that's an interesting name.
Jennings, that was another name.
Yeah. And I think when you look up and down the list of players on the roster, there's certainly a lot of interesting and worthy candidates.
Jordan Matthews, yeah.
Jordan Matthews. But I'm actually going to go with the one guy you didn't. Oh, my God. My voice just died on me right there. I'm going to go with the one guy you didn't mention, Vinny. And you know what? I think the second I say him, too, you're going to be like, damn, why didn't I think about this? Because I think, while he's gotten some opportunity, moving forward, I think people talk about the edge position. They say the 49ers need to add someone there. You know why they don't, Vinny? It's because they got Charles Omenihu.
I was thinking about it. I was thinking about Omenihu.
Who, when you look at the opportunity he's gotten this season, really the few games where he's had more than 15 or 20 total snaps, because there were a lot of games where he got 10. He has multiple pressures in almost every single one of those games. In fact, against the Cowboys, when he got more snaps than any other game he had gotten before, 35 snaps, which I think the next highest game is 20 snaps. He got 6 pressures against the Cowboys on 35 snaps. So this is a guy who, when you give him the opportunity, he's certainly made the most of it. And I think moving forward, people have talked about the edge position. Oh, the 49ers need to add a guy here. No, they don't, because they have Ebukam, they have Charles Omenihu, and we've seen what Chris Kocurek can do in terms of bargain hunting. He can find these guys at the bottom of free agency that other teams just aren't even thinking about, guys who other teams are done with. And he can make the most out of him. So I think he's going to make the most out of Charles Omenihu moving forward. And I wouldn't even be surprised if he was their starter, Vinny. Like, I think he is really that good. I think he is worthy of being that guy who, if you put him next to Nick Bosa or opposite of Nick Bosa, he can wreak havoc in every single game. Like, okay, here's what I was looking at. The 3 games where he has more than 20 snaps, 7 total pressures. So this is a guy who, like I said, man, you give him the opportunity, he is going to absolutely make the most of it, and he needs to get that opportunity next season.
Yeah, that's a guy that they traded for to bolster that edge, like you said, and I think he made some big plays towards the end of the year.
Yeah, and I think that's what we've seen from the 49ers, right? It's they want to go and attack the edge position. They want to invest more in it, but they don't have to do a lot to do so. They trade this late round pick for a Menahue. Last season, they did the same for Jordan Willis. Samson Ebukam, a low-risk signing, someone who they could have just cut this offseason if he didn't work out. Hey, he looks like he's working out. So I think the 49ers just do this over and over with these players. Kevin Gibbons, that's another good name.
That's a good name.
That people should be thinking about.
Contavious Street as well. Is he free agent?
Street, absolutely. Yeah, I think he's a restricted free agent, though, I believe. But I think point being is they'll have the opportunity to get guys back like that. But let's talk a little more free agency, Vinny. We only got a few more minutes here, but I do want to discuss one of the polls I put at the beginning of the chat. If you scroll all the ways up to the chat, make sure you vote on the poll. And in fact, everybody, subscribe to the channel. Give us a like. Make sure you drop some comments. Let us know what you think about what we're talking about. And like I said, we're probably going to be trying to do some sort of call-in show later. So look out for that. We'll be trying to do that next week. But Vinny, we got 1 or 2 more topics we can hopefully get in before we get out of here. Let's talk about this, though. I think the 49ers are going to be in a spot where they don't get to keep all their free agents. They're going to have to pick and choose this offseason. And I think in particular, you look at Arden Key and Jordan Willis, and it's an interesting choice. Jordan Willis, obviously more the pure edge guy. Arden Key, they brought him inside out. He did a lot of different things, and he was really successful in the later part of the season. So, Vinny, you can only keep one of these guys. Who are you keeping?
I know he made the big play in the NFC divisional round, but I'm going to go with the guy who made more plays throughout the year. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go with Arden Key. And I think more teams may be more interested. I think it would be easier for them to re-sign Jordan Willis than it will be to re-sign Arden Key.
Absolutely.
And I think that's where you can kind of have that argument of maybe you go Jordan Willis instead. But I'd rather pay like a couple extra $1 million for a better product than a guy who won't be as attractive to other teams. And I think we saw a lot of good things from Arden Key last year, especially towards the end of the year as well. And even when some guys on the edge were out, like Jordan Willis, missed the first 6 games last year with the PEDs, I think it was.
Yeah, PED suspension.
So that's where I think I would go Arden Key.
So I'm going to say I go Jordan Willis, and it's for the exact reason you brought up earlier. And I think it's a totally fair point, which is that Jordan Willis is just going to be a hell of a lot cheaper than Arden Key is. And I think for the 49ers strategically moving forward, they've spent a lot, and they've spent resources to invest in their defensive line. You know, think about the contract and the picks they gave up for Dee Ford, what they did to get Javon Kinlaw. If I'm this team, you know, I see Arden Key the same way I see Kerry Hyder, and I think he's better than Kerry Hyder. But it's the same situation, which is, hey, I'm glad we got a great season out of you. Go get that bag, because we can bring someone back, or we can bring 2 guys back at your cost, and we can still get that production. So I think from the 49ers perspective, because you have Chris Kosaric, right, because you have such an elite developer of talent, bargain bin hunting is just the way to go. And I think for a lot of teams should employ this strategy more, where, you know, for years, think about the way the Steelers would draft a wide receiver position, where every single time they took a guy in the 2nd or the 3rd round, they would hit, and they would have a high hit rate. So I think for the 49ers, trade 5th, 6th, 7th round picks for Jordan Willis, for Charles Omenihu, draft DJ Jones late in the part of the draft. They don't need to go and re-sign Arden Key. They don't need to re-sign guys like DJ Jones. Would they prefer to? Hell yes, those are really good players. But in the same sense, they're going to be having to pay Nick Bosa a lot of money in the future. Eric Armstead already is getting paid a lot of money. So I think for them, maximizing the efficiency of the position, that is the most important thing, because I think there are just so many other spots where they don't have surefire answers. I mean, that interior of the offensive line, you touched on Lake and Tomlinson earlier. They could have 3 brand new starters, left guard, center, and right guard next season. So, look, would I like to keep Arden Key? Yeah, I'd love to keep Arden Key. But if it's between him and Jordan Willis, I'd go with the cheaper guy 10 times over if I'm the 49ers. Unless the more expensive guy is Nick Bosa, they to me, they should have that stars and scrubs attitude like the Rams do, but just at that position, right? Where, get yourself D Ford, get yourself a Nick Bosa, Eric Armstead, those type of players. The ancillary players should be 5-6 guys who can come in rotations, who maybe other teams aren't giving him the multi-year offers that Arden Key and Kerry Hyder might, would get in free agency. I look at guys like Maurice Hurst. They might bring him back, even though he was hurt all season, because no one else wants him. But to the 49ers, they can make the most out of him. So, yeah, I think it's just a philosophy thing with the 49ers, Vinny, where, they've invested in this position before, and it's been a mistake with Javon Kinlaw and D Ford specifically. Obviously, you're not investing so much more in Arden Key, but really keeping that flexibility to me is more valuable than keeping a really good player like Arden Key. Even though I value him, I trust Chris Kosser to be able to develop and do that over again more than I do Arden Key to continue and keep going upward in his success.
Yeah. Oh, that's fair.
And it's an interesting argument for sure. And you know what? I think there's a lot of free agents like that for the 49ers where, you look at a guy like Jeff Wilson versus Raheem Mostert, right? Yeah, would they love to keep Raheem Mostert? Sure. But keeping Jeff Wilson Jr. as that 4th backup guy, where they can figure out and maybe draft a guy, that to me, that's where the 49ers have to get smarter about what they're doing. They have to identify what they do well and maximize it and make the most out of it. And I don't feel like they've been doing the best job of that, but I still think they've been doing a fairly good job. So what they need to do moving forward is make sure they divert their resources into the areas where corner, offensive line, they just can't develop guys, right? Versus spending so much on the defensive line. You've proven you can do it. But that's going to be it for us today, everyone. It's been almost a full hour. Vinny and I will be back next week sometime. I am on a more regular streaming schedule now. It's going to be Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, as long as we have guests every week. So make sure you guys tune in for that. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. Put yourselves on notifications so you can see every time we're going to be live streaming, Vinny and I, and the different guests I have. That's going to be it for us, though. Anything before we get out of here, Vinny? Anything to touch on?
No, just like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. And I'm excited to see what the rest of the season and off season has in store. And the day Jimmy Garoppolo is traded, I think there's going to be some very interesting responses to that. So who knows when that comes, but it can very well come within the next month. So.
Hey, next time we talk, we could be talking about Jimmy Garoppolo on another franchise. It's interesting, but that'll be it for us today, everyone. We'll be back next week. I'll be back next week, so keep your eye out for that. Follow us on Twitter if you haven't already. Peace out, everyone.